my name is NotBen, and welcome back to my channel. So, it's been a while. I've been pretty busy since the last time I put out a video. I graduated from college, I moved, as you can probably tell since my office looks different now, but I'm back. So, as you may know, I love spreadsheets and data, and so today I will be using my skills to examine all of the crops in Stardew Valley in order to find which one is the most profitable crop you can grow on your farm in order to maximize your total profits. So without further ado, let's get to it. So we're defining profitability as getting the most money from a singular crop. But how do we do that? So let's look into my process a little bit. Profitability comes from a few things. The most important things you might have already guessed, like the seed price and how much you can sell the crop for. I mean, that's how you calculate profit, price minus expenses. But there are more factors that you need to be aware of when it comes to overall profitability, especially when we're looking at Stardew Valley. The first one we're going to look at is yield. So yield refers to how many crops are produced when you harvest that plant. For example, if you harvest a pumpkin, you get 1 pumpkin. But if you plant 1 blueberry seed, that blueberry will yield 3 blueberries at harvest, essentially tripling the profit comparatively. Another important factor is growth time, or the time it takes between when you plant the seed and when you harvest the seed. This is important to know to determine the amount of profit per the time that seed is in the ground, or a profit per day ratio. For example, if you can sell 1 crop for double the price, but it takes twice the amount of time to grow as another plant, is it really that much more profitable? That's why we need to look at it. Similar to this is regrowth time, which refers to crops that keep producing after the first harvest, like corn and eggplants. The regrowth time is the amount of time it takes to produce another plant after the initial harvest. Now, with these factors in mind, it's time to start collecting data. All of the crop data that I'm using, I collected from the Stardew Valley wiki, which collected information on crops, but also a whole lot more things. I really recommend the site in general if you need any Stardew Valley knowledge. It's really helpful for crops, but also for things like villagers' schedules and their likes and dislikes. Check it out if you haven't already. So the Stardew Valley wiki does provide the crop prices, but they also, similar to what I'm gonna do, they have a profit per day. So most of the values are the same, but I did get different values for some of them, so do with that information as you will. Who knows, I might have calculated things wrong. We'll see. So after I got all this data, I put it into a giant spreadsheet so I could start calculating. Side note, I'd never really looked at the differences in how much you can sell the crop based on its quality, like silver, gold, and iridium. So I took the time to look into that as well. I don't know why I never realized that iridium pricing is just twice the normal sell price, but hey, at least I know that now. Also, funnily enough, silver is 1.25 times the normal price and gold is 1.5 times the normal price. But because of rounding, sometimes you get prices that are actually slightly lower than they should be. So theoretically, some prices are worth more relatively at the gold and silver prices, or you're not technically getting your full money's worth. I'm looking at you, coffee. So I don't know what to do with that information, but now I have it, I guess. Anyways, back to what we're doing. As with any mathematical problem, it's also really important to state your assumptions. It's something that I've had to do my entire engineering career, and so here are the assumptions that I use for my calculations. 1. I assume that you're buying your crops from Pierre, so I'm using Pierre's pricing. You're a monster if you buy your crops at Joja Mart instead of Pierre's. Support small business. 2. You might have noticed if you've ever planted sunflowers that they sometimes produce seeds as well. So I'm accounting for that by having the seed price be 0 for sunflowers. It might not be the best way to do it, but since sunflowers produce 0 to 2 seeds per harvest, I just averaged that you're getting your seed money back. If you don't like it, sue me or do this yourself, I guess. 3. I also assumed non-irrigated crops when it came to crops like rice, since if you're trying to maximize your profits by planting the maximum amount of that specific crop, there's no way that all of them could be irrigated, so I just assumed that none of them would be. Next, when it comes to yield, I took the stated yield and ignored when a crop could possibly spawn more than 1 crop at harvest. Since I couldn't get an exact probability on it, I thought it would just be simpler and more accurate to assume the base yield. The only exception to this is potatoes, because they are known to have a spawn rate of 1.2 crops per harvest, which is much more consistent and more significant than sometimes you get 2 tomatoes at harvest. Can't tell you when though. And finally, I'm also ignoring giant crops and other random events that happen on your farm. So now that we have the assumptions, let's move on to our calculations. So I have this giant spreadsheet filled with lots of data. So what do we do with it? I decided to look at profitability two different ways. The first one, which is the one that you can also find on Stardew Valley Wiki, is how much profit do you make per day that that crop is in the ground, or the profit per day. But I didn't really like how this didn't account for crops that span multiple seasons or really didn't factor in regrowth times as well. So I also calculated the profit for if you planted that crop and kept it in that same tile for the entirety of the season. So if it has a regrowth time, just keeping it there for the whole season, or if you kept planting that crop as many times as possible if it doesn't regrow. This value became my profit per season. You might think that these would be the same or at least similar, but I did find that it actually wasn't in a lot of cases, which is interesting to see, at least to me. I won't go into the specific math for a lot of this as not to bore you, but the calculations basically involve finding how many crops you could yield per planting or season, depending on the criteria, multiplying that number by the sell price and subtracting the seed price. This got a little complicated for the regrowth crops, but whatever, I did it. If I made a mistake, I'm sorry, I'm not perfect. So the results were both surprising and not surprising. Crops like unmilled rice and coffee were found to be extremely unprofitable, which makes sense because they're both crops that you're not really supposed to sell on their own, because you're supposed to refine them into artisan goods and not just sell them on their own. Fun fact, you'd lose over $1,000 doing that for each seed for coffee. But I also expected seeds that spanned multiple seasons, like corn, for example, to do really well, and I found that the amount of seasons a crop spans doesn't really affect probability that much, except for when it came to one plant, but we'll get to that later. Well, I guess I've been putting it off for long enough, so without further ado, the most profitable crop in Stardew Valley is ancient fruit. I don't know why, but I just feel a little disappointed about that. I guess it makes sense because you make a lot of profit off of them because they technically have zero for a seed price since you craft the seeds yourself. They sell for a lot and they span all 3 months that you can plant things in. So it makes sense. It's just a little underwhelming since it doesn't really seem like a traditional crop to me, like one you can buy at Pierre's store or something, I don't know, that I would make dinner with. So I'm going to ignore that for now. And I'm going to go on to the next most profitable crop, which is sweet gemberry. Okay, that also makes sense, but it's also extremely disappointing, at least to me. I guess that makes sense. It wasn't really what I wanted. If you're interested, here's the entire list. Here's one by the profit per day, and here's one by season. Pause the video if you want to look at them, I guess. But I'm not done yet. The whole reason that I did this was in order to optimize the profit on your farm, right? Like, why am I doing this if that's not the goal? So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use this data to find the most profitable crop in each season, so using the profit per season metric, to find out how much money you could possibly make in 1 year. Like, what's the most money you can possibly make in 1 year? So for the crops I found, once again ignoring ancient fruit and the sweet gemberry, the crops that I found were strawberries for spring, star fruit for summer, and pumpkins for fall. So to calculate the maximum total profit that you could make, I'm going to use the total tillable tiles, that's a tongue twister, the total tillable tiles on a standard farm, which I found from the Stardew Valley Wiki, and do the math assuming you used every single one of these tillable tiles. So using these values, I found that if you planted these crops in their respective season non-stop each season on every tile of your farm, you could make $7.7 million in 1 year. Are they dollars in Stardew? I don't know is it dollars? I'm gonna say dollars. I'm using dollars. But fine, I guess that's not technically the true limit of profitability because we're not using ancient fruit, which is the actual most profitable crop. So, doing the same math for ancient fruit, that number becomes almost $17 million, which is a lot. But wait, there's more. These numbers assume normal quality pricing. So what happens if all of your crops were also iridium? The first number, the one for strawberries, starfruit, and pumpkins, becomes over $17 million per year, so better than the baseline ancient fruit value. And the ancient fruit one becomes $34 million in just 1 year. But here's the thing. These numbers assume that you're using every single tile on your farm for crops. So no animals, no buildings, and oh yeah, no sprinklers. So that sounds like hell on earth. or hell in Pelican Town, and is totally unfeasible for any normal person to do. But this all still goes to show what the most profitable crops are in Stardew Valley, I guess. So I guess the practical use for this would just be to plant more strawberries and more pumpkins and more starfruit, or invest in a lot of ancient fruit, I guess, if that's your thing. I don't know how helpful this actually is going to be to people, but I had fun making it. I love using spreadsheets, I love crunching numbers, so I hope you enjoyed this madness as well. I think next I might do a similar thing for artisan goods, just to see if it is actually worth it to plant crops like coffee beans, but we'll see. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you'd like me to see next, if you'd like me to go back to the format where I use slides or keep talking like this. I don't know. We'll see. Well, anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.